You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. I have Payal Kadakia. She's a founder of what's called ClassPass. She's the author of LifePass, Drop Your Limits, Rise to Your Potential, a groundbreaking approach to goal setting. So I'm happy to have her. And Payal, thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for having me, Richard.
Yeah, tell me a bit about your background. Like, how did you, get into goal setting and what is ClassPass and LifePass? And let's, start at the beginning and go from there.
Well, first of all, I grew up in New Jersey. I'm a child of two immigrants who came from India in the 70s. And I spent a lot of my childhood dancing because that was really what I loved in my way of connecting to my identity as an Indian and an American. As I got older, I, was sort of following the path of what my parents really wanted me to do. So I went and got a good college degree from MIT, and then I worked in consulting, but my heart really wanted to do something different. And I didn't know what that was. And it was sort of a journey and pathway I didn't really see many other people who either looked like me or were like me doing. So I kind of needed to put together a plan and really start prioritizing my life in a way that would help me achieve my dreams. And, I made decisions along the way, which we can talk about, but ultimately, after changing jobs a few times, I decided that I would start a company to help people find classes because I was always looking for different classes to take on top of my professional life. And, one day I was looking for a ballet class and I couldn't find it. And in the midst of that search, I just realized technology could solve so much, not just for me, but for so many people who are trying to keep their passions in their life. And that's really what started the idea of ClassPass. ClassPass is now a monthly membership that lets people take fitness classes and wellness experiences at different partners across the world, actually. So we're global. And I started that company in 2011. We just sold the company 2 months ago. So I'm on a different journey now, but obviously it's such an incredible milestone for the company. And in that whole, time, I also started a dance company. And, I decided that I really wanted to write this book because I wanted to share with people a different methodology and a unique methodology, one that I think I've carried since I was really young, how to really not let anything stand in my way, whether that be mental constraints like my identity or expectations on me, fear of failure, and even real constraints like maybe I don't have the money yet or the skill sets or know the right people, and how I work through all of those and how other people can work through them to achieve their dreams. And on top of that, I think part of all of life is figuring out how to set and prioritize goals that are really in line with who we are. And I'd sort of developed this goal setting method several years ago called the LifePass method. I'd started it in 2014 during a really hard time in my life that, I really needed to find a way to prioritize the right things in both my personal and professional life, and developed a system that basically created this goal setting process that I have in the book.
Well, before we get into that, it seems like the examples that we see lately in society is people are crying and complaining that this is unfair, that's unfair, they're misunderstood. They don't seem to be taking much ownership of, or solving problems. What's your observation?
Do you mean generally, like how people are reacting to any type of...
the news puts this stuff forward, but it seems like they're doing all negative stuff, but it seems like there's a lot of examples lately culturally of people saying, well, this is unfair, that's unfair. And I don't hear much about goal setting. I don't hear much about ownership of anything. I hear more about, it just seems like everything's turned into a complaint. But what's your perspective?
Yeah, obviously I acknowledge all those things in the way anyone is feeling. I think my way of always dealing with any of that, and I faced a lot of racism when I was younger for being Indian, obviously not always fit into the tech world being a 4'11" woman. But I think the motto I've lived by is I'm going to work hard and show you my potential. And if I can do that, I know I am therefore changing your perspective on me and hence hopefully the people who look like me behind me. And that's sort of been the way I've approached it is let me show you, let me change your mind, whether that be through my dance company where I show like Indian art and, through dance or through building a tech company that, gets people to sort of look inward a little bit as well. My motto has just been work really hard and show them, be so good they can't ignore you, as Steve Martin once said.
So tell me about the goal setting. What does that look like and how does it work?
Yeah. So step one of the process is to reflect. So it's about really coming up with a set of words that define the past year. So, and they can be thoughts, emotions, anything. It's interesting, right? We want to move forward, but we need to know where we are today, right? Before we do that. And so step one is about looking backwards and figuring out, what emotions you're carrying with you right now, what thoughts are really taking up and potentially, either weighing you up or weighing you down or lifting you up. And that's where it starts. And then step two of the process is to pretend a year from now, you're doing the same exercise you were just doing, reflecting on the year and coming up with a set of words that you want to be able to say. So you really are defining sort of your thoughts and emotions and the themes that are going to be prevalent in the coming year. Versus thinking about it in the sense of just like accomplishments, which we're used to thinking about, especially, as we move into the New Year's season, right? So I think it's one of those things that I realize that I need to center in on how I want to feel and what I really want to embody as a human being through that year. So that's where it starts. The next part of the process, step three, is all about figuring out how to focus. So the way we start that is by doing a time analysis. So thinking about all the areas that you spend any significant of time on, right? And it's interesting because sometimes we forget what we spend time on, whether that's commuting, social media, watching TV, and then also, where does work go?
Well, Payal, one quick second before we move on. The first step that you laid out, the calendar and the year ahead, and then projecting forward a year, and you said various words or expressions used to describe the year. What's an example that you've helped someone, change? They had their they did this exercise. It kind of came out, and you helped coach them to do something better, and they felt better about it. Like, do you have any examples of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, they forget and they don't know how to take care of themselves, right? So this idea of self-care, right? And connecting inwards a little bit. So a lot of times, like I've seen the word connection, right? And sometimes we don't always know what that means. And we've gone through the process and enabled them to either define what connection means to them and then put them into real goals of what people do you really want to see, right? What communities do you really want to see? And then potentially, as you look inward, what kind of connection are you looking for? So does that mean setting goals to meditate, right? Or to potentially go on a retreat or find a way to turn your phone off after some time in the night. It's really about being specific, which we go into as the process goes on. But it's really about dreaming towards the life you want to live. One of the words I remember for me, I always think about is, and I travel so much for work, is I always wanted home, right? Now, to most people, you think of home and, an achievement for the year would be like buy a home, right? Or kind of like put down, either get like paying rent or get a mortgage, any of that. And for me, it was a very different thing. It was about defining what this construct of home meant, which meant like literally maybe just, knowing that, when I traveled, I had certain things with me always, right? And that I would, in the apartments I was living in, have it decorated a certain way and have certain things there. It became like really specific in terms of more of like an environment and an embodiment of my surroundings versus it being like needing to have a home in a specific area, right? So I think it's really about dreaming about what these words really feel to you versus what they actually are in practice. So that's sort of where it starts. After you've done, your reflect words and you've established your dream words, which are the words that you're setting for the coming year, we start this diagnostic on your time, right? So we start thinking about all the areas that you spend any significant of time on. And I ask people to list them, right? Because like I said, sometimes you don't know what you're always spending your time on. And if we want to create change in our life, we have to almost take stock of where we are today, right? And what we're actually spending our hours on. And once you do that, the important thing now is to really look at those areas of time and see how they are serving you, right? So these are like the chunks of your life, right? And if you really were to categorize it, there's things like family, friends, work. social engagements, right? It's kind of these broader categories that you have that you can be specific on. But then the number one thing that to do, and this is the next part of it, is to rate yourself on how are those areas of your life serving you towards the words that you want to achieve for the year, right? And this is once again more of just taking stock to figure out where your life is right now so we can figure out where to focus. And once you've done the exercise of defining the areas and rating them, the next part of this process is really where we focus. And I ask people to circle the 4 to 5 areas in their life that they're going to actually focus on making any sort of goals in and change in for only the next 3 months, right? So we're not focusing on a year. We're not focusing on just a week. We're saying we're going to set goals in these 4 to 5 areas for the next 3 months. And we're going to be very specific about it, which is the next step of the process. But we're going to really want to put all of our attention into these buckets. And we're okay if some of these other buckets in our life don't change as much, right? Because so much of the time we end up looking at everything and want to make movement across so many different factors of our life. And it's hard, right? It's hard to balance all of them. It's hard to make progress in all of them. You end up actually making no difference at all and making no change in setting goals that you actually accomplish. So this is designed to become very precise and very focused so you can put all of your extra energy that you do have into actually making change in certain areas of your life. So that's step 3. When step 3 is
right, but again, like step 2 and step 3, any interesting examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So step 2, we were just talking about the idea of like home and dreaming about, having connection in your life. Step 3 is going through and figuring out, okay, like, and I'd rather take an example from sort of beginning to end, right? So pretend in step 1, someone was saying that they reflected on the last year and, like I said, felt lonely, right? And step 2, they were saying, I'm seeking connection, right? Because they don't want to feel that sense of loneliness anymore. So in step 3, they can sort of define, that they have friends and that they have, time that they're living, whether it's on social media, right? Or watching TV, and they can come up with different ratings, right? So I've seen people say, like, a lot of times people usually rate social media quite low in the process, but then there are there's obviously things like family and friends that get, middle ratings, but they also do need to be focused on. And by the way, this rating process is not necessarily about just saying, okay, I'm doing awesome in an area. It's really about figuring out, is that area serving you towards the words you've chosen step 2? So that's really the goal of it, is making sure that those areas of your life are really moving you forward there. So for example, if you said in step 3, friends, but the friends you're hanging out with aren't the ones who are making you feel connected, you'd probably have a pretty low score there, right? And so if you decided to focus on friends to help you kind of deal with this idea of connection and get over your loneliness, you would then, as we move to step 4, start writing really specific goals under friends. So that would be, okay, I want to see these 3 friends who maybe you haven't talked to in a year, friends that make you feel so great, but you just haven't had time for. You have to start writing specific goals on who you want to spend time with, right? So that becomes a very specific thing. Like, I'm going to have dinner with Jill. I'm going to have, I'm going to do a weekend away with these 3 girlfriends, right? These become very specific things that you can do and sort of aim to achieve to help you combat the journey you just had from reflection to dreaming to focusing.
What about the last 2 years with all this mess? What have you observed, and how does that change your goal setting process?
Yeah, I mean, look, very unexpected things can happen in people's lives, right? Obviously, this has been a big 2-year anxiety-filled, change-filled time for everyone. That doesn't mean we can't progress, right, towards some sort of growth, right? And I think a lot of when I think about this process, it's about growing as a human, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that, you need to be everywhere and out there. It just means, how do you want to grow as a human? So there are goals that I've seen people set around just reading more, like I said, meditating more, finding ways to do like phone calls with people that they really care about, that they miss through this time. Obviously more professionally, people have had to sort of change the way they either operate their businesses in every way, but I think there are ways to embrace the change and learn more. So a lot of what I've seen is people setting goals that help them prioritize this change and this different way of testing things. And I think what we have to always realize, and I think the process is designed in this way, is that things keep changing. And that's part of what I love about the 3 months and being able to go back and then pick another set of focus areas, because it's okay to change, and life changes and we change and the world changes around us. And we should be able to adapt and set a new set of goals that moves us forward, right? So if something isn't serving us and working us in those first 3 months, we can then move and change it in the next 3 months.
Well, very good. So are there groups that are using your goal setting method, or is this just like an individual thing? You know, they consume your content, the book, and then they act on their own? What's your overall recommendation depending on the situation?
Yeah, I definitely have recommendations. And, this is a process I started about 7 years ago. I've done it for 7 years straight. I've taught it to actually a lot of my team, and I've had so many friends who I've done it with as well. And people have asked me to always share it. I wanted to share it in the right way. So I needed to, find the right way to do it. And this book was a perfect opportunity for me to really share it. I do recommend, it depends on how you keep yourself accountable. If you could do it with a friend or someone that you recommend, or that you are speaking with, that you feel like understands you and can keep you accountable to it. I think that's a really good way to make sure that you keep getting it done and keep just checking in on progress on your goals. I also heavily recommend sharing your goals with important people in your life. We forget sometimes, even especially when it's things that we think other people don't really see as our priorities or as their own, we forget to share it. And I think the more you can share this process, you'll realize that the people who love you will want to invest in making sure your goals come to life as well.
Any tips for people that feel overwhelmed, which is probably like every person in the world, X number of times a week or day?
It's such an important thing to be able to first, like I said, look inward, right? Take that breath and clear the noise out, and then start really dreaming on what is important to you, and take out the guilt, take out the noise, and set, important priorities and goals that you feel you must do, right? So many of us listen to the shoulds in our life. And because of that, we don't end up doing the things that we really feel the most fulfilling. And that honestly just creates more and more anxiety and a sense of sort of, unfulfillment for all of us. And I think the more we do what we truly love, the more we light up as human beings, and the more we're able to give and serve others. And I think that's really the key of it, is to take out the noise, look inside yourself, and then move forward with that sense of priority and sense of specificity in what your goals are and what you want to achieve, and don't let anyone get in the way of it.
Well, very good. Payal, so what are some resources for people that are listening? Where can they go and how do they engage with your content?
Yep, they can go to lifepassbook.com and get the book. And, there's also a webinar about the goal setting process as well that they can get as well when they buy the book.
Okay, well, very good. Payal, thanks for coming on the call. I really appreciate it. And,
thank you so much for having me, Richard.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.